I read 6 science fiction books in January of 2026. One of these books is absolute elite level, God tier science fiction. One of them was so bad I didn't even finish it, but the others were very, very interesting and definitely worth talking about. So let's get started. And I'm going to start with the God tier elite level book from an author that I now have absolute nothing but respect for. I think she's one of the greatest authors of the 20th century, and I'm so happy I read this book. It's The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. I read this book together with my friend the Lit Wizard. We've got a huge video up. It's about a 40-minute discussion, talk about this book. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this. You can go cruise over and watch that video. But I do want to say that I was so happy I read this book because it's just so well written that it really blew me away, and I really came around to really liking Ursula K. Le Guin. This is my second Le Guin book. The first one I read was The Dispossessed, which I liked, but I didn't really think it was great. And I was kind of thinking like, is Le Guin maybe not for me? I know she's not overhyped, but I was just thinking maybe it's just not for me. But after reading this, definitely Le Guin is the best for me. Definite God tier, absolute respect for her. And one of the things I respect is it's a tiny little book. It's so short, but she packs a lot into this book, and it's a complete story. She's able to tell the whole story in just a couple hundred pages, less than a couple hundred pages, actually. In case you don't know, it's the story of George Orr, who is a man who realizes he has this strange power to change reality with his dreams, and it's kind of driving him crazy, as you might expect. What's really peculiar, though, is that he can not only change reality, but he's the only one that knows something changed. So he can dream that something doesn't exist anymore. He wakes up, that thing doesn't exist anymore. No one knows it ever existed except for him. So he goes to see a therapist. The therapist starts kind of messing with his head, and then the whole story goes to some really interesting places from there. It touches on topics of like, social engineering, how do we fix problems in society? Why do we create more problems when we try to fix problems? And of course, it gets into like a really big question of, what is reality? It was a very, very interesting book. This book also, not only are the ideas great in it, but the writing is so good. And it's like that kind of perfect marriage of science fiction of ideas and also just really good writing, really good storytelling on a sentence level, on a paragraph level, and on the whole book. The whole thing just works. It's just firing on all cylinders all the way through. Such a fantastic read. Really happy that I read this. Highly recommend this book. This is one of those great books too, that if you're the kind of person who maybe doesn't read a lot of science fiction, or you're not sure what science fiction is worth reading, if you're a literary fiction reader, this is a great book to start with. The second book that I've got for you is an interesting book. I read it on my Kindle. I came away with it just feeling really peculiar and intrigued. It's a very strange book. It's called The Employees by Olga Ravn. This book is kind of experimental, I guess, in a sense that the narrative is a series of interviews of these crew members of a spaceship. And the spaceship is out in space kind of collecting objects to be studied or sold or both. But it's very interesting in that it's all told in the form of interviews with these crew members, and it starts to become revealed that there's been some kind of strange event and a series of strange events that led up to this one event. So what we learn is that the crew kind of came upon this very enthralling type of planet, collected some strange objects from it, and now that the objects are on the ship, the objects are being studied and kind of pulled apart to find out what they are. And the objects have a very strange effect on the crew. And the crew is, before I talk about the effect, this is what makes it even stranger. The crew is this mix of humans and then synthetically engineered and created humanoids. They're kind of human, but not really human, but they're kind of human. it's a bit strange and it's not explained very well, which actually works to the advantage of the story. What we learn, though, is that these objects have an effect on the crew of making them kind of turned on and horny and feeling really happy and all these sort of good vibes going on. And these objects that we're not sure, they're some kind of living thing. We don't know if it's animal or plant or something in between or something new. And slowly things kind of come unraveled on the ship. We're still not really sure what happened. And I think that's really what works within this book, is there's a lot of ambiguity and there's a lot of things that are not explained. And I think that actually works because it adds to kind of the mystery, but it also doesn't distract you. You know, a lot of stories like this would fill you in with tons of backstory about how did we get into space? Who are these people? How did they make the humanoids? You know, what is the planet where we went to? What happened there? You know, someone could have easily probably gotten 9 or 10 books out of just this story. But instead we've got a really compact, almost kind of experimental novel, again, told only through interviews with the crew. So it's a very, very interesting book, very interesting read. And I really recommend this, again, to people who maybe read a lot of contemporary new fiction or postmodern fiction and are kind of interested in like what's going on with writers who are writing adjacent to science fiction and literary fiction. This would be a great choice for that. All right, now this third book is an author that was new to me, but is definitely not new to science fiction. Someone who's very well known, very well respected. I just have never gotten around to reading any of his books, but I'm really happy that I read this because it was an absolute joy and delight to read. And that book is this, Zima Blue by Alastair Reynolds. Alastair Reynolds, a huge name in science fiction, and I just had never gotten around to reading his stuff. This is a collection of short stories written at different periods of time. They're not necessarily related. They're not part of the same universe. You don't see recurring characters or anything like that. But this was just a really nice balance of just like dazzling, wow, cool shit on the page, sci-fi, cool robots, spaceships, weird planets, strange cosmic phenomena. Really cool, just like wow kind of stuff. And then but they're also really well-crafted stories that have that oh moment in the story where you realize like, oh, that's what's going on here, or that's what these people are really up to, or that's where this is really going. So I found it to be really well-crafted and a really nice, like I said, just that really nice balance of just like dazzling cool shit that you want from sci-fi, but also really well-crafted stories with characters that you genuinely care about. I will say that not only is Alastair Reynolds great at just very quickly crafting a strange new world, to borrow a phrase, but he's also really well at creating characters that you care for and putting them in kind of compromising situations and letting them kind of figure out what are they going to do next. So fantastic read. I'm definitely going to be seeking out more Alastair Reynolds. I've got House of Suns staring at me from that shelf, and that's going to have to be read pretty soon because I really enjoyed this. All right, now this next book from another giant in science fiction, somebody really well known, writing of a universe that is very well known to a lot of science fiction writers, but it was the first time for me. It was Player of Games by Iain M. Banks, my first Banks novel, my first culture novel, and I have to say, I really liked it. This book really worked for me in a lot of different ways, and I found myself to continue to think about it and talk about it. I was talking to a friend about it today at work, and yeah, it's just a great book. I've got a huge video about this up on my Patreon that I just put up. It's not huge, it's about 20 minutes discussing this book. No spoilers, but there's a lot to talk about in the book, so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here. This is set in the culture universe, which is kind of a utopian, kind of a horny, progressive Star Trek type world. I say Star Trek type because it's kind of utopian. It's post-capitalist, post-gender. Star Trek is obviously not post-gender, but it's Star Trek-ish in the sense that, you know, resources are really not an issue. Technology is just like wow, you know, just everything just kind of works. And everything is kind of made to enhance and assist humans to live their best life, if you will. But despite living in this utopian society, there's one problem that cannot be solved, and that is boredom. And that leads us to our main character, Gurga, who is the player of games. He's like this kind of professional gamer in the culture universe, and he learns of a strange alien empire called the Azad. And they play a game called Azad. And he wants to go learn this game and go play it. Every 6 years, the Azad have this kind of like Olympic round of Azad, in which the winner can become the emperor of Azad. So there's a lot of Azad in the book. But I think that's actually the best part of the book, is learning about the Azad and the game. The writing in the book, the best writing in the book is when Gurga is playing a game. There's an early section where he's playing this kind of like, this kind of weird chess game on a train, which is really well written. And that just kind of foreshadows some even better writing that comes when Gurga is playing Azad. And it turns into this kind of like all-encompassing game, and it's a really high stakes game. It's really, really cool. Almost kind of like a Casino Royale in the 34th century, if you will. I'll kind of leave it at that. So really good book, highly recommended. All right, now the next book, which is the 5th book that I read this month. This is the one that falls under the category of why. Why did I read this? I knew I wasn't gonna like it, but I told myself I might like it, and I knew I wasn't gonna like it, but I tried it anyways. Why did I do that to myself? Why do we do these things to ourselves? It's a book called Sword and Planet, and it's an anthology of science fiction fantasy put together by Christopher Rocchio of Sun Eater fame. I did not like Empire of Silence, which was the first Sun Eater book. I only read about 40 pages of it, and it was not for me. I don't know why I thought this would be, but I did. I kind of got duped on it. So I read about half the story, so I guess I can't technically say I didn't like it because I didn't technically finish it. I technically DNF'd it. I just didn't care for the stories that I read. They just felt very juvenile, very adolescent. I get it that it's kind of supposed to be pulpy writing, and that's kind of what drew me to it, because I haven't read that kind of science fiction at all. So I just wanted to kind of read this and get familiar with it. And I feel like I'm kind of reading the wrong stuff. And I should probably just go back to the real pulpy science fiction stuff from those kind of classic sci-fi eras, instead of this kind of retro. It just feels like, that's the word I want to say. It feels like kind of retro wannabe revivalist. I guess pastiche would be another word you could use for it. Where kind of people are kind of cosplaying pulp writing. I don't know. It's just not for me. Maybe you'll like it. I think if you like that kind of writing, you might get into this. I did read some reviews where people who were fans of Sun Eater and of Christopher Rocchio, they did say they really liked it. So if you're a fan of Sun Eater, if you like that kind of stuff, this might be something that you want to check out, but it just wasn't for me. Now, the last book I've got for you, the last book I read this month, I just snuck this in at the end of the month. I've had this book sitting on my shelf for 6 months or maybe even a year. I'm not sure. I bought it here in Shanghai, and I bought it because it has science fiction writing from China in it. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't read it until I saw a video from Bookpilled where he talked about it real briefly, and what he described in it. I knew, like, okay, I got to read that book. That's the next book I'm going to read. Wow, this book, fantastic. Absolutely smashed it and blew it away for me. It's Invisible Planets. What's the subtitle? An anthology of contemporary Chinese science fiction in translation. Sorry for waving it around there. That's what it looks like. Invisible Planets. And this is edited and translated by Ken Liu. It's got it doesn't have a sticker on it, but it's got a big circle thing on it. It's one of these Tor books, these are floppy. They feel cheap, but they're pretty well made. This says, featuring 2 stories by Hugo Award winner Ken Liu. And they're probably the 2 worst stories in the whole book. But I'm starting to think that if the 2 worst stories in the book are from Ken Liu, the book is probably pretty good, because they weren't terrible stories. They're just Ken Liu. I don't know if it's a translation issue. I don't think it is, because the other translated stories didn't have this problem. He's just a really dry and boring writer, I should say. But the other writing in here, wow, amazing, absolute. This one, I'm going to put it again at the God tier, elite level, especially the opening 3 stories from Chan Chiu-fan, a new writer that I just discovered because of this. Thank you, Bookpilled. I'm going to try to find more of his books. Fantastic stuff. Really great mix of social commentary, science fiction, extremely good writing that is very well paced, very intriguing. It's just working on all levels, and it's just flawless writing. You would not know this is in translation at all. I think there's a lot of great writing in China that does get translated, but probably doesn't get read because, of course, a lot of people think China bad, but there's kind of also, there might be some prejudice towards the language. I don't mean in a racist way, but like a prejudgment that Chinese writing would have a certain kind of quality that couldn't be read, and my light just went out. So let's go with it if you're still with me, dear viewer. Great book. All of the stories have elements of social commentary in it, especially kind of this notion and this question of what is China's place now that China has emerged as the stable economic superpower that is still the manufacturing hub for the world. You know, there's stories set in places like Shenzhen in the future where there's still tons of manufacturing going on, but also a lot of emergent technology and a lot of the kind of class problems that go with rapid development. Those kinds of topics are explored in these stories, in these books. And to me, it was interesting. And those are topics that are very much in conversation in China, at least among Chinese friends that I have. And I find it really interesting because Western media, particularly American media, paints China as a place where people don't talk about those kinds of things, which is just the dumbest idea ever. Of course people talk about those things. And of course Chinese people talk about those things. Chinese people are very well educated and very aware of global affairs and very aware of the development of their own country. And it's a legit question. And it's not a new question for China either. This is a question that Hong Kong asked when Hong Kong was first controlled by colonial powers, had a period of autonomy, and then came under the wing of mainland China. This is a question that, has always not always, but has come up repeatedly throughout time. And it's really interesting to see how that question kind of gets played out. There's some other just like really cool stories too that have a lot of Chinese cultural elements of there's like some kind of Chinese ghost story, Chinese fantasy stories with lots of mythical elements, folk elements, gods and demons and ghosts and that kind of thing, which are all really prevalent in Chinese media and in Chinese stories. So it's really cool that that kind of stuff is coming through on that. And it's cool to see it translated by someone like Ken Liu. Say what you will about him, he seems to really be a part in bringing some of those stories and some of that writing to Western audiences and to Western readers. And I think that whether you like it or not, whether you like his writing or not, I think that's actually a pretty significant cultural thing to be happening. So very cool book. You should be able to find this. This is a Tor paperback. So this was not something that was exclusive to China or Asia. So I'd really recommend you guys to check this out. If you're into science fiction and if you like stuff like with a lot of social commentary in it, really check it out. I feel like I've talked about this book a lot already, so I probably need to wind it down and wrap it up. So there you go. Those are 6 science fiction books I read in January of 2026. And I crafted my own little tongue twister just for that. So if you've read any of these, feel free to leave a comment below. If you're curious about any of them, feel free to leave a comment below. And if you've got some suggestions for me to read next month based on what I've told you I like here, I would love to get some suggestions also. And in case you don't know and you're still here, my name is Carl, and this has been Please Read Your Book.